Hello, my friends. It's Indiana Holmes again, and tonight we continue with Treasure Island, Chapter 5, The Last of the Blind Man. My curiosity, in a sense, was stronger than my fear, for I could not remain where I was, but I crept to the bank again, whence sheltering my head behind a bush of broom, I might command the road before our door. I was scarcely in a position ere my enemies began to arrive, 7 or 8 of them, running hard, their feet beating out of time along the road, and the man with the lantern some paces in front. 3 men ran together hand in hand, and I made out, even though the mist, that the middleman of this trio was the blind beggar. The next moment his voice showed me that I was right. "Down with the door," he cried. "Aye, aye, sir," answered 2 or 3, and a rush was made upon the Admiral Benbow, the lantern-bearer following, and then I could see them pause, and hear speeches passed in a lower key, as if they were surprised to find the door open. But the pause was brief, for the blind man again issued his commands. His voice sounded louder and higher, as if he were afire with eagerness and rage. "In, in," he shouted, and cursed them for their delay. 4 or 5 of them obeyed at once, 2 remaining on the road with the formidable beggar. There was a pause, then a cry of surprise, and then a voice shouting from the house, "Bill's dead." But the blind man swore at them again for their delay. "Search him, some of you shirking lubbers, and the rest of you aloft and get the chest," he cried. I could hear their feet rattling up our old stairs, so that the house must have shook with it. Promptly afterwards, fresh sounds of astonishment arose. The window of the captain's room was thrown open with a slam and a jingle of broken glass, and a man leaned out into the moonlight, head and shoulders, and addressed the blind beggar on the road below him. "Pew!" he cried. "They've been before us. Someone's turned the chest out alow and aloft." "Is it there?" roared Pew. "The money's there." The blind man cursed the money. "Flint's fist, he cried. "We don't see it here, nohow," returned the man. "Here, you below there. Is it on Bill?" cried the blind man again. At that, another fellow, probably him who had remained below to search the captain's body, came to the door of the inn. "Bill's been overhauled already," said he. "Nothing left." "In these people of the inn, it's that boy. I wish I had put his eyes out," cried the blind man. Pew. "There was no time ago. They had the door bolted when I tried it. Scatter, lads, and find 'em." "Sure enough, they left their glim here," said the fellow from the window. "Scatter and find 'em. Rout the house out," reiterated Pew, striking with his stick upon the door. Then there followed a great to-do through all our inn. Heavy feet pounding to and fro, furniture thrown over, doors kicked in, until the very rocks re-echoed, and the men came out again, one after another, on the road, and declared that we were nowhere to be found. And just the same whistle that had alarmed my mother and myself over the dead captain's money was once more clearly audible through the night, but this time twice repeated. I had thought it to be the blind man's trumpet, so to speak, summoning his crew to the assault, but I now found that it was a signal from the hillside towards the hamlet, and from its effect upon the buccaneers, a signal to warn them of approaching danger. "There's Dirk again," said one. "Twice. We'll have to budge, mates." "Budge, you skulk," cried Pew. "Dirk was a fool and a coward from the first. You wouldn't mind him." "They must be close by. They can't be far. You have your hands on it. Scatter and look for them. Dogs!" "Oh, shiver my soul," he cried. "If I had eyes." This appeal seemed to produce some effect, for 2 of the fellows began to look here and there among the lumber, but half-heartedly, I thought, and with half an eye to their own danger all the time, whilst the rest stood irresolute on the road. You have your hands on thousands, you fools, and you hang a leg? You'd be as rich as kings if you could find it, and you know it's here. And you stand there skulking? There wasn't one of you dared face Bill, and I did it, a blind man, and I'm no to lose my chance for you. I'm to be a poor, crawling beggar, sponging for rum, when I might be rolling in the coach. If you had the pluck of a weevil in a biscuit, you would catch them still. Hang it, Pew, we've got our doubloons, grumbled one. They might have hid the blessed thing, said another. Take the Georges, Pew, and don't stand here squalling. Squalling was the word for it. Pew's anger rose so high at the objections, till at last, his passion completely taking the upper hand, he struck at them right and left with his blindness, and his stick sounded heavy on one or more of them. These in their turn cursed back to the blind miscreant, threatened him in horrid terms, and he tried in vain to catch the stick and wrestle it from his grasp. This quarrel was saving of us. For a while it was still raging. Another sound came from the top of the hill on the side of the hamlet, the tramp of the horses galloping. Almost at the same time a pistol shot flashed, and a report came from the hedge side, and that was plainly the last signal of danger. For the buccaneers turned at once and ran, separating in every direction, one seaward along the cove, one slant across the hill, and so on, so that in a half a minute not a sign of them remained but Pew, him that they had deserted. Whether in sheer panic or out of revenge for his ill words and blows, I know not. But there he remained, behind, tapping up and down the road in a frenzy, and groping and calling for his comrades. Finally, he took a wrong turn and ran a few steps past me towards the hamlet, crying, "Johnny, Black Dog, Dirk," and other names. "You won't leave old Pew, mates, not old Pew." Just then, the noise of horses topped the rise, and 4 or 5 riders came in sight in the moonlight and swept at full gallop down the slope. At this, Pew saw his error, turned with a scream, and ran straight for the ditch, into which he rolled. But he was on his feet again in a second, and made another dash, now utterly bewildered, right under the nearest of the coming horses. The rider tried to save him, but in vain. Down went Pew with a cry that rang high into the night, and the 4 hoofs trampled and spun him and passed by. He fell on his side, then gently collapsed upon his face, and moved no more. I leaped to my feet and hailed the riders. They were pulling up at any rate, horrified at the accident, and I soon saw what they were. One, tailing out behind the rest, was a lad that had gone from the hamlet to Dr. Livesey's. The rest were revenue officers, whom he had met by the way, and with whom he had had the intelligence to return at once. Some news of the lugger in Kit's Hole had found its way to the supervisor of dance, and set him forth that night in our direction, and to that circumstance my mother and I owed our preservation from death. Pew was dead, stone dead. As for my mother, when we had carried her up the hamlet, a little cold water and salts, and that soon brought her back again, and she was none the worse for her terror, though she still continued to deplore the balance of the money. In the meantime, the supervisor rode on as fast as he could to Kit's Hole, but his men had to dismount and grope down the dingle, leading and sometimes supporting their horses, and in continual fear of ambushes. So it was no great matter for the surprise that when they got down to the hole, the lugger was already under way, though still close in. He hailed her. A voice replied, telling him to keep out of the moonlight or he would get some lead in him. And at the same time a bullet whistled close by his arm. Soon after, the lugger doubled the point and disappeared. Mr. Dance stood there, as he said, like a fish out of water, and all he could do was to dispatch a man to warn the cutter. And that, he said, is just about as good as nothing. They've got off clean, and there's an end. Only, he added, I'm glad I trod on the Master Pew's corns, for by this time he had heard my story. I went back with him to Admiral Benbow, and you cannot imagine a house in such a state of smash. The very clock had been thrown down by these fellows in their furious hunt after my mother and myself, and though nothing had actually been taken away except the captain's money bag and a little silver from the till, I could see at once that we were ruined. Mr. Dance could make nothing of the scene. They got the money, you say. Well then, Hawkins, what in fortune were they after? More money, I suppose? No, sir, not money, I think, I replied. In fact, sir, I believe I have the thing in my breast pocket, and to tell you the truth, I should like to get it put in safety. To be sure, boy, quite right, said he. I'll take it if you like. I thought perhaps Mr. Livesey, I began. Perfectly right, he interrupted very cheerily. Perfectly right. A gentleman and a magistrate. And now I come to think of it, I might as well ride round there myself and report to him or squire. Master Pew's dead. When all's done, not that I regret it, but he's dead, you see, and people will make it out against an officer of His Majesty's revenue. If I make it out, then they can. Now I'll tell you, Hawkins, if you like, I'll take you along. I thanked him heartily for the offer, and we walked back to the hamlet where the horses were. By the time I had told my mother of my purpose, they were all in the saddle. Dodger, said Mr. Dance, you have a good horse. Take up this lad behind you. As soon as I was mounted, holding on to Dodger's belt, the supervisor gave the word, and the party struck out at a bouncing trot on a road to Dr. Livesey's house. Chapter 6. The Captain's Papers. We rode hard all the way till we drew up before Dr. Livesey's door. The house was all dark to the front. Mr. Dance told me to jump down and knock, and Dodger gave me a stirrup to descend by. The door was opened almost at once by the maid. Is Dr. Livesey in? I asked. No, she said. He had come home in the afternoon, but had gone up to the hall to dine and pass the evening with the squire. So there you go, boys, said Mr. Dance. This time at a distance was short. I did not mount, but ran with Dodger's stirrup leather to the lodge gates and up the long, leafless, moonlit avenue to where the white lines of the hall buildings looked on either hand on great old gardens. Here Mr. Dance dismounted, and taking me along with him, was admitted at a word into the house. The servant led us down a matted passage, and showed us at the end of the great library, all lined with bookcases, and busts upon top of them, where the squire and Dr. Livesey sat, pipe in hand, on either side of a bright fire. I had never seen the squire so near at hand. He was a tall man, over 6 feet high, and broad in proportion, and he had a bluff, rough, and ready face, all roughened and reddened and lined in his long travels. His eyebrows were very black and moved readily, and this gave him the look of some temper, not bad, you would say, but quick and high. Come in, Mr. Dance, says he, very stately and condescending. Good evening, Dance, says the doctor, with a nod, and good evening to you, friend Jim. What good evening wind brings you here tonight? The supervisor stood up straight and stiff and told his story like a lesson. And you should have seen how the two gentlemen leaned forward and looked at each other and forgot to smoke in their surprise and interest. When they had heard how my mother went back to the inn, Dr. Livesey fairly slapped his thigh, and the squire cried, "Bravo!" and broke his long pipe against the grate. Long before it was done, Mr. Trelawney, that you will remember was the squire's name, Trelawney, had got up from his seat and was striding about the room, and the doctor, as if to hear the better, had taken off his powdered wig and sat there looking very strange indeed with his own close-cropped black poll. At last Mr. Dance finished the story. "Mr. Dance," said the squire, "you are a very noble fellow, and as for writing down that black, atrocious miscreant, I regard it as an act of virtue. Sir, like stamping on a cockroach. This lad Hawkins is a trump, I perceive. Hawkins, will you ring that bell? Mr. Dance must have some ale. And so, Jim, said the doctor, you have the thing that they were after, have you? Here it is, sir, said I, and gave him the oilskin packet. The doctor looked it over, as if his fingers were itching to open it, but instead of doing that, he put it quietly in the pocket of his coat. Squire, said he, when Dance has had his ale, he must, of course, be off on his Majesty's service. But I mean to keep Jim Hawkins here to sleep at my house, and with your permission, I propose we should have up the cold pie and let him sup. As you will, Livesey, said the squire. Hawkins has earned better than a cold pie. So a big pigeon pie was brought in and put on a side table, and I made a hearty supper, for I was as hungry as a hawk, while Mr. Dance was further complimented, and at last dismissed. And now, squire, said the doctor, and now, Livesey, said the squire in the same breath. One at a time, laughed Dr. Livesey. You have heard of this Flint, I suppose. Heard of him, cried the squire. Heard of him, you say? He was the bloodthirstiest buccaneer that sailed. Blackbeard was a child to Flint. The Spaniards were so prodigiously afraid of him that I tell you, sir, I was sometimes proud he was an Englishman. I've never seen his topsails with these eyes off Trinidad, and the cowardly son of a rum puncheon that I sailed with put back, sir, into port of Spain. Well, I've heard of him myself in England, said the doctor, but the point is, had he money? Money, cried the squire. Have you heard the story? What were these villains after but money? What do you care for but money? For what would they risk their rascal carcasses but for money? That we shall soon know, replied the doctor. But you are so confoundedly hot-headed and exclamatory that I cannot get in a word. What I want to know is this. Supposing that I have here in my pocket some clue to where Flint buried his treasure, will that treasure amount to much? Amount, sir, cried the squire. It will amount to this. If we have the clue you talk about, I fit out a ship in Bristol dock and take you and Hawkins here along, and I'll have that treasure if I search a year. Very well, said the doctor. Now then, if Jim is agreeable, we'll open the packet. And he laid it before him on the table. The bundle was sewn together, and the doctor had to get out his instrument case and cut the stitches with his medical scissors. It contained two things, a book and a sealed paper. First of all, we'll try the book, observed the doctor. The squire and I were both peering over his shoulder as he opened it, for Dr. Livesey had kindly mentioned me to come round to his side of the table where I had been eating, to enjoy the sport of search. On the first page there were only some scraps of writing, such as a man with a pen in his hand might make for idleness or practice. One was the same as a tattoo mark, Billy Bones, his fancy. Then there was Mr. W. Bones' mate, no more rum, off Palm Key he got it, and some other snatches, mostly single words of unintelligible kind. I could not help wondering who it was that had got it, and what it was that he got. A knife in his back, as like as not. Not much instruction there, said Dr. Livesey as he passed on. The next 10 or 12 pages were filled with curious series of entries. There was a date at one end and a line, and then another sum of money, as in common accounts of accounting books, but instead of explanatory writing, only varying numbers of crosses between the two. On the 12th of June, 1745, for instance, a sum of £70 had plainly become due to someone, and there was nothing but 6 crosses to explain the cause. In a few cases, to be sure, the name of a place would be added as Offie Caracas, or a mere entry of latitude and longitude, such as 62 degrees 17, 20, 19 degrees to 40. The record lasted over nearly 20 years, the amount of separate entries growing larger as time went on, and at the end a grand total had been made out after 5 or 6 wrong additions, and these words appended, "Bones, his pile." "I can't make heads or tails of this," said Dr. Livesey. "The thing is as clear as noonday," cried the squire. "This is the Black-Hearted Hound's account book. These crosses stand for the names of ships or towns that they sank or plundered. The sums are the scoundrel's share, and where he feared in ambiguity, you see he added something clear. Offy Caracas. Now you see, here was some unhappy vessel, boarded off the coast. God help the poor souls that manned her. Coral long ago." "Right," said the doctor. "See what it is to be a traveler? Right. And the amounts increase, you see, as he rose in rank. There was little else in the volume but a few bearings of places noted in the blank leaves towards the end, and a table for reducing French, English, Spanish moneys to a common value." "Thrifty man," cried the doctor. "He wasn't the one to be cheated." "And now," said the squire, "for the other." The paper had been sealed in several places with a thimble by the way of a seal, and a very thimble perhaps, that had been found in the captain's pocket. The doctor opened the seals with great care, and there fell out a map of an island, with latitude and longitude, soundings, names of hills and bays and inlets, and every particular that would be needed to bring a ship to a safe anchorage upon its shores. It was about 9 miles long, 5 miles across, shaped, you might say, like a fat dragon standing up, and had 2 fine land-locked harbors, and a hill in the center part marked the Spyglass. There were several editions of later date, but above all, 3 crosses of red ink, 2 on the north part of the island and 1 in the southwest, and beside this last, in the same red ink, and in a small, neat hand, very different from the captain's tottery characters, these words, "Bulk of treasure here." Over on the back, the same hand had written this further information: "Tall tree, spyglass shoulder, bearing a point to the north of north-northeast. Skeleton Island, east-southeast by and by east, 10 feet. The bar silver is in the north cache. You can find it by the trend of the east hammock. 10 fathoms south of the black crag with the face on it. The arms are easy found. In the Sound Hill, north point of North Inlet Cape, bearing east and a quarter north. J.F." That was all, but brief as it was, and to me incomprehensible, it filled the squire and Dr. Livesey with delight. "Livesey," said the squire, "you will give up this wretched practice at once. Tomorrow I start for Bristol. In 3 weeks' time, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 10 days, we'll have the best ship, sir, and the choicest crew of England. Hawkins shall come as cabin boy. You'll make a famous cabin boy, Hawkins. You, Livesey, are ship's doctor. I am admiral. We'll take the Redouth, Joyce, and Hunter. We'll have favorable winds, a quick passage, and not the least difficulty in finding the spot and the money to eat, to roll in, to play duck and drag with ever after." "Trelawney," said the doctor, "I'll go with you, and I'll go bail for it. So will Jim, and be a credit to the undertaking. There's only one man I'm afraid of." "And who's that?" cried the squire. "Name the dog, sir." "You," replied the doctor, "for you cannot hold your tongue. We are not the only men who know of this paper. These fellows who attacked the inn tonight, behold, they are bold, desperate, blades for sure. And the rest who stayed aboard the lugger, and more I dare say not far off, are, one and all, through thick and thin, bound that they'll get that money. We must none of us go alone till we get to sea. Jim and I shall stick together, and in the meanwhile, you'll take Joyce and Hunter when you ride to Bristol, and from the first to the last, not one of us must breathe a word of what we found. Livesey returned to the squire. You are always in the right of it. I'll be as silent as the grave. Part 2. The Sea Cook. Chapter 7. I go to Bristol. It was longer than the squire imagined ere we were ready for the sea, and none of our first plans, not even Dr. Livesey's, of keeping me beside him, could be carried out as we intended. The doctor had to go to London for a physician to take charge of his practice. The squire was hard at work at Bristol, and I lived on at the Hall under the charge of old Redruth, the gamekeeper, almost a prisoner, but full of sea dreams and the most charming anticipations of strange islands and adventures. I brooded by the hour together over the map, all the details of which I remembered. Sitting by the fire in the housekeeper's room, I approached the island in my fancy from every possible direction. I explored every acre of its surface. I climbed 1,000 times to that tall hill they call Spyglass, and from the top enjoyed the most wonderful and changing prospects. Sometimes the isle was thick with savages with whom we fought, sometimes full of dangerous animals that hunted us. But in all my fancies, nothing occurred to me so strange and tragic as our actual adventures. So the weeks passed on, till one fine day there came a letter addressed to Dr. Livesey, with this addition, to be opened in the case of his absence, by Tom Redruth, or young Hawkins. Obeying this order, we found, or rather I found, for the gamekeeper was a poor hand at reading anything but print, the following important news. Old Anchor Inn, Bristol, March 1st, 17 something. Dear Livesey, as I do not know whether you are at the Hall or still in London, I send this in double to both places. The ship is brought and fitted. She lies at anchor, ready for sea. You never imagined a sweeter schooner. A child might sail her, 200 tons, named Hispaniola. I got her through my old friend Blandly, who has proved himself throughout the most surprising trump. The admirable fellow literally slaved in my interest, and so I may say did everyone in Bristol, as soon as they got wind of the port we sailed for. Treasure, I mean. Rudith, said I, interpreting the letter, Dr. Livesey will not like that. The squire has been talking after all. Well, who's a better right? Growled the gamekeeper. A pretty rum go if squire ain't to talk for Dr. Livesey, I should think. At that, I gave up all attempts at commentary and read straight on. Blandly himself found the Hispaniola, and by the most admirable management got her for the merest trifle. There is a class of men in Bristol monstrously prejudiced against Blandly. They go the length of declaring that his honest creature would do anything for money, that the Hispaniola belonged to him, and that he sold it to me absurdly high, the most transparent calumnies. None of them dare, however, deny the merits of the ship. So far there was not a hitch. The work people, to be sure, riggers and what not, were most annoyingly slow, but time cured that, and it was the crew that troubled me. I wished a round score of men, in case of natives, buccaneers, or odious French, and I had the worry of the deuce itself, to find so much as half a dozen, till the most remarkable stroke of fortune brought me the very man that I required. I was standing on the dock, when by the merest accident I fell in talk with him. I found he was an old sailor, kept a public house, knew all the seafaring men in Bristol, had lost his health ashore, and wanted a good berth as cook to get to sea again. He had hobbled down there that morning, he said, to get the smell of the salt. I was monstrously touched. So would you have been. And out of pure pity, I engaged him on the spot to be the ship's cook. Long John Silver, he is called, and has lost a leg. But that I regarded as a recommendation, since he lost it in his country's service under the immortal Hawk. He has no pension, Livesey. Imagine the abominable age we live in. Well, sir, I thought I had only found a cook, but he was a crew I had discovered. Between Silver and myself, we got together in a few days a company of the toughest old salts imaginable, not pretty to look at, but fellows by their faces, of the most indomitable spirit. I declare we could fight a frigate. Long John even got rid of two out of the 6 or 7 I had already engaged. He showed me in a moment that they were just the sort of freshwater swabs we had to fear in an adventure of importance. I am in the most magnificent health and spirits, eating like a bull, sleeping like a tree, yet I shall not enjoy a moment till I hear my old tarpaulins tramping around the capstan. Seaward ho! Hang the treasure! It's the glory of the sea that has turned my head. So now, Livesey, come post. Do not lose an hour if you respect me. Let young Hawkins go at once to see his mother, with Rudith for a guard, and then both come full speed to Bristol. John Trelawney. Postscript. I did not tell you that Blandley, who, by the way, is to send a consort after us if we don't turn up by the end of August, had found an admirable fellow for sailing master, a stiff man, which I regret, but in all other respects a treasure. Long John Silver unearthed a very competent man for mate, a man named Arrow. I have a boatswain who pipes, Livesey, so things shall go man-o'-war fashion on board the good ship Hispaniola. I forgot to tell you that Silver is a man of substance. I know of my own knowledge that he was a banker's account, which has never been overdrawn. He leaves his wife to manage the inn, and as she is a woman of color, a pair of old bachelors like you and I may be excused for guessing that it is the wife, quite as much as the health, that sends him back to roving. J.T. P.P.S. Hawkins may stay one night with his mother. J.T. You can fancy the excitement into which that letter put me. I was half beside myself with glee, and if ever I despised a man, it was old Tom Redruth, who could do nothing but grumble and lament. Any of the under gamekeepers would gladly have changed places with him, but such was not the squire's pleasure. The squire's pleasure was that, like law among them all, nobody but old Redruth would have dared so much as even to grumble. The next morning he and I set out on foot for the Admiral Benbow, and there I found my mother in good health and spirits. The captain, who was so long been a curse and so much discomfort, was gone, where the wicked cease from troubling. The squire had everything repaired, and the public rooms and the sign repainted, and had added some furniture, above all, a beautiful armchair for mother in the bar. He had found her a boy as an apprentice also, so that she should not want help while I was gone. It was on seeing that boy that I understood for the first time my situation. I had thought up to that moment of the adventures before me, not at all of the home that I was leaving. And now, at the sight of the clumsy stranger who was to stay here in my place beside my mother, I had my first attack of tears. I am afraid I led that boy a dog's life, for as the new to the work, I had 100 opportunities of setting him right and putting him down, and I was not slow to profit from them. The night passed, and the next day after dinner, Redruth and I, afoot again on the road, I said goodbye to Mother and the cove where I had lived since I was born, and the dear old Admiral Benbow, since he was repainted, no longer quite so dear. One of my last thoughts was of the captain, who had so often strode along the beach with his cocked hat, his saber-cut cheek, and his old brass telescope. Next moment we had turned the corner, and my home was out of sight. The mail picked us up about dusk at the Royal George on the Heath. I was wedged in between Redruth and a stout old gentleman, and in spite of the swift motion of the cold night air, I must have dazed a great deal from the very first, and then slept like a log, uphill, on a down dale, through stage after stage. For when I was awakened at last, it was by a punch in the ribs, and I opened my eyes to find that we were standing still before a large building in a city street. And that day had already broken a long time. "Where are we?" I asked. "Bristol," said Tom. "Get down." Mr. Trelawney had taken up his residence at an inn far down the docks to superintend the work upon the schooner. Thither we had now to walk, and on our way, to my great delight, lay along the quays and beside the great multitude of ships of all sizes and rigs and nations. In one, sailors were singing at their work. In another, there was men aloft, high over my head, hanging to threads that seemed no thicker than a spider's. Though I had lived by the shore all my life, I seemed never to have been near the sea till then. The smell of tar and salt was something new. I saw the most wonderful figureheads, that all had been far over the ocean. I saw, besides, many old sailors with rings in their ears, and whiskers curled in ringlets, and tarry pigtails, and their swaggering, clumsily sea walk. And if I had seen as many kings or archbishops, I could not have been more delighted. And I was going to see myself. To sea in a schooner, with a piping boatswain and a pigtailed singing seaman, to sea, bound for an unknown island, and to seek for buried treasure. While I was still in this delightful dream, we came suddenly in front of a large inn, and I met Squire Trelawney, all dressed out like a sea officer, in stout blue cloth, coming out of the door with a smile on his face, and a capital imitation of a sailor's walk. "Here you are," he cried, "and the doctor came last night from London. Bravo! The ship's company complete." "Oh, sir," cried I, "when do we sail?" "Sail," he says, "we sail tomorrow." Chapter 8. At the sign of the spyglass, when I had done breakfasting, the squire gave me a note addressed to John Silver, at the sign of the spyglass, and told me I should easily find the place by following the line of docks and keeping a bright lookout for a little tavern with a large brass telescope for a sign. I set off overjoyed at this opportunity to see some more of the ships and seamen, and picked my way among a great crowd of people. The carts and the bales for the dock was now at its busiest, until I found the tavern in question. It was a bright enough little place of entertainment. The sign was newly painted. The windows had neat red curtains. The floor was cleanly sanded. There was a street on each side of an open door on both, which made the large low room pretty clear to see in spite of the clouds of tobacco smoke. The customers were mostly seafaring men, and they talked so loudly that I hung at the door, almost afraid to enter. As I was waiting, a man came out of the side room, and at a glance I was sure he must be Long John. His left leg was cut off close by the hip, and under the left shoulder he carried a crutch, which he managed with wonderful dexterity, hopping about it like a bird. He was very tall and strong, with a face as big as a ham, plain and pale, but intelligent and smiling. Indeed, he seemed the most cheerful spirits, whistling as he moved about and among the tables, with a merry word or a slap on the shoulder for more favored of his guests. Now, to tell you the truth, from the very first mention of Long John in the Squire Trelawney's letter, I had taken a fear in my mind that he might prove to be the very one-legged sailor whom I had watched for so long at the old Benbow. But one look at the man before me was enough. I had seen the captain and Black Dog and the blind man, Pew, and I thought I knew what a buccaneer was like, a very different creature, according to me, from this clean and pleasant-tempered landlord. I plucked up courage at once, crossed the threshold, and walked right up to the man where he stood, propped on his crutch, talking to a customer. "Mr. Silver, sir?" I asked, holding out a note. "Yes, my lad," said he. "Such is my name, to be sure. And who may you be?" And then, as he saw the squire's letter, he seemed to give me something almost like a start. "Oh," said he, quite loud, and offering his hand, "I see. You are our new cabin boy. Pleased I am to see you." And he took my hand in his large, firm grasp. Just then one of the customers at the far side rose suddenly and made for the door. It was close by him, and he was out in the street in a moment, but his hurry had attracted my notice, and I recognized him at a glance. It was the tallow-faced man, wanting 2 fingers, who had come first to the Admiral Benbow. "Oh," I cried, "stop him. It's Black Dog." "I don't care 2 coppers who he is," cried Silver, "but he hasn't paid his score. Harry, run and catch him." One of the others, who was nearest the door, leaped up and started in pursuit. "If he were Admiral Hawke, he shall pay his score," cried Silver. And then, relinquishing my hand, "Who did you say he was?" he asked. "Black what?" "Dog, sir," I said. "Has Mr. Trelawney not told you of the buccaneers? He was one of them." "So," cried Silver. "In my house? Ben, run and help Harry. One of those swabs, was he? Was that you who you was drinking with him, Morgan? Step up here." The man, whom he called Morgan, an old gray-haired, mahogany-faced sailor, came forward pretty sheepishly, rolling his quid. "Now, Morgan," said Long John very sternly, "you never clapped your eyes on that black dog before, did you now?" "Not I, sir," said Morgan with a salute. "You didn't know his name, did you?" "No, sir." "By the powers, Tom Morgan, it's good for you," exclaimed the landlord. "If you had been mixed up with that sort of guy, with the like of that, you would never have put another foot in my house. You may lay to that." "And what was he saying to you?" "I don't rightly know, sir," answered Morgan. "Do you call that a head on your shoulders or a blessed dead eye?" cried Long John. "Don't rightly know, don't you? Perhaps you don't happen to rightly know who you was speaking to, perhaps. Come now, what was he jawing? Voyages, captains, ships, pipe up, what was it?" "We was talking of keel haulin'," answered Morgan. "Keel haulin', was you? And a mighty suitable thing, too. And you may lay to that. Get back to your place for a lubber, Tom." And then, as Morgan rolled back to his seat, Silver added to me in a confidential whisper that was very flattering, as I thought, "He's quite an honest man, Tom Morgan, only stupid." And now he ran on again aloud. "Let's see Black Dog. No, I don't know the name, not I. Yet I kind of think I've seen the swab. He used to come here with a blind beggar, he used to." "That he did, you may be sure," said I. "I knew that blind man too. His name was Pew." "It was," cried Silver, now quite excited. "Pew. That was his name for certain. Ah, he looked a shark, he did. If we run down this Black Dog now, there'll be news for Captain Trelawney. Ben's a good runner. Few seamen run better than Ben. He should run him down, hand over hand, by the powers. He talked o' keel hauling, did he? I'll keel haul him. All the time he was jerking out these phrases, he was stumping up and down the tavern with his crutch, slapping the tables with his hand, and giving such a show of excitement as he would have convinced an Old Bailey judge or a Bow Street runner. My suspicions had been thoroughly reawakened on finding Black Dog at the spyglass, and I watched the cook narrowly, but he was too deep and too ready and too clever for me. And by the time the two men had come back out of breath and confessed that they had lost track of him in the crowd and been scolded like thieves, I would have gone bail for the innocence of Long John Silver. "See here now, Hawkins," said he. "Here's a blessed hard thing on a man like me, now ain't it? There's a Captain Trelawney. What's he to think? Have I, this confounded son of a Dutchman, sitting in my own house, drinking my own rum? Here you comes and tells me of it plain, and here I let give us all the slip before my blessed deadlights. Now, Hawkins, you do me justice with a captain. You're a lad, you are, but you are smart as paint. I see that when you first come in. Now here it is. What could I do with this old timber I hobble on? When I was an A.B. master mariner, I'd have come up alongside him, handed over hand, and broached him in a brace of old shakes, I would. But now, and then, all of a sudden he stopped, and his jaw dropped as though he had remembered something. "The score," he burst out. "3 goes o' rum. Why, shiver me timbers, if I hadn't forgotten my score." And falling on a bench, he laughed until the tears ran down his cheeks. I could not help joining, and we laughed together, peal after peal, until the tavern rang again. "Why, what a precious old sea calf I am," he said at last, wiping his cheeks. "You and me should get on well, Hawkins, for I'll take my Davy. I should be rated ship's boy, but come on, stand by to go about. This won't do. Duty is duty, messmates. I'll put on my old cockerel hat and step along, if you to the Captain Trelawney, and report this here affair. For mind you, it's serious, young Hawkins, and neither you nor me come out of it with what should be so make as bold a call to his credit. Nor you neither, say you not smart, none of the pair of us smart, but dash my buttons, that was a good 'un about my score." And he began to laugh again, and that was so heartily that, though I did not see the joke as he did, I was again obliged to join in his mirth. On our little walk along the quays, he made himself the most interesting companion, telling me about the different ships that we passed by, their rig, tonnage, nationality, explaining the work that was going forward, how one was discharging, another was taking on cargo, and a third making ready for sea, and every now and then telling me some little anecdote of a ship's or seaman, of repeating a nautical phrase till I had learned it perfectly. I began to see that here was one of the best possible shipmates. When we got to the inn, the squire and Dr. Livesey were seated together, finishing a quart of ale with a toast in it, before they should go aboard the schooner on a visit of inspection. Long John told the story from the first to last, with a great deal of spirit and the most perfect truth. That was how it were now, weren't it, Hawkins? He would say now and again, and I could always bear him entirely out. The two gentlemen regretted that Black Dog had got away, but we all agreed that there was nothing to be done, and that after he had been complimented, Long John took up his crutch and departed. "All hands aboard by 4 this afternoon," shouted the squire after him. "Aye, aye, sir," cried the cook in the passage. "Well, squire," said Dr. Livesey, "I don't put much faith in your discoveries, as a general thing, But I will say this, John Silver suits me. The man's a perfect trump, declared the squire. And now, added the doctor, Jim may come on board with us, may he not? To be sure he may, says Squire. Take your hat, Hawkins, and we shall see the ship. Chapter 9. Powder and Arms. The Hispaniola lay some way out, and we went under the figureheads and round the sterns of many other ships, and their cables sometimes grated underneath our keel, and sometimes swung up above us. At last, however, we got alongside, and were met and saluted as we stepped aboard the mate, Mr. Arrow, a brown old sailor, with earrings in his ears and a squint. He and the squire were very thick and friendly, but I soon observed that things were not the same between Mr. Trelawney and the captain. This last was a sharp-looking man who seemed angry with everything on board, and was soon to tell us why, for he had hardly got down into the cabin when a sailor followed us. "Captain Smollett, sir, axing to speak with you," said he. "I am always the captain's orders. Show him in," said the squire. The captain, who was close behind the messenger, entered at once and shut the door behind him. "Well, Captain Smollett, what have you to say?" "All well, I hope. All shipshape and seaworthy?" "Well, sir," said the captain, "better speak plain. I believe, even at the risk of offense, I don't like this cruise. I don't like these men, and I don't like my officer. That's short and sweet. Perhaps, sir, you don't like the ship?" inquired the squire, very angrily, as I could see. "I can't speak as to that, sir, not having seen her tried," said the captain. "She seems a clever craft. More I can't say." "Possibly, sir, you may not like your employer either," says the squire. But here Dr. Livesey cut in. "Stay a bit," said he. "Stay a bit. No use of such questions as that, but to produce ill feeling. The captain has said too much, or has said too little, and I am bound to say that I require an explanation of his words. You don't like this cruise? Now why?" "I was engaged, sir, on what we call sealed orders, to sail this ship for that gentleman where he should bid me," said the captain. "So far, so good. But now I find that every man before the mast knows more than I do. I don't call that fair. Now, do you?" "No," said Dr. Livesey, "I don't." "Next," said the captain, "I learn we are going after treasure. Hear it from my own hands. Mind you, now treasure is a ticklish work. I don't like treasure voyages on any account, and I don't like them, above all, when they are secret, and when, begging your pardon, Mr. Trelawney, the secret has been told to the parrot." "Silver's parrot?" asked the squire. "It's a way of speaking," said the captain. "Blabbed, I mean. It's my belief neither of you gentlemen know what you're about, but I'll tell you my way of it. Life or death, and a close run. That is all clear, and I dare say true enough," replied Dr. Livesey. "We take the risk, but we are not so ignorant as you believe us. Next, you say you don't like the crew. Are they not good seamen?" "I don't like them, sir," returned the Captain Smollett, "and I think I should have had the choosing of my own hands, if you go to that." "Perhaps you should," replied the doctor. "My friend should perhaps have taken you along with him, but the slight, if there be one, was unintentional. And you don't like Mr. Arrow?" "I don't, sir. I believe he's a good seaman, but he's too free with the crew to be a good officer. A mate should keep himself to himself, shouldn't drink with the men before the mast." "Do you mean he drinks?" cried the squire. "No, sir," replied the captain, "only that he's too familiar." "Well, now, and that's the long and the short of it." "Captain," asked the doctor, "tell us what you want." "Well, gentlemen, are you determined to go on with this cruise?" "Like iron," said the squire. Very good, said the captain. Then, as you've heard me very patiently, saying the things I could not prove, hear me a few words more. They are putting the powder and the arms in the forehold. Now, you have a good place under the cabin. Why not put them there? First point. Then you are bringing 4 of your own people with you, and they tell me some of them are to be berthed forward. Why not give them the berths here beside the cabin? Second point. Any more? Asked Mr. Trelawney. One more, said the captain. There's been too much blabbing already. Far too much, agreed the doctor. I'll tell you what I've heard myself, continued Captain Smollett, that you have a map of an island, and that there's crosses on the map to show where the treasure is, and that the island lies, and then he named the latitude and longitude exactly. I never told that, cried the squire, to a soul. The hands know it, sir, returned the captain. Livesey, that must have been you or Hawkins, cried the squire. It doesn't much matter who it was, replied the doctor. And I could see neither he nor the captain paid much regard to Mr. Trelawney's protestations. Neither did I, to be sure. He was so loose a talker. Yet, in this case, I believe he was really right, and that nobody had told the situation of the island. Well, gentlemen, continued the captain, I don't know who has this map, but I make a point. It shall be kept a secret from me and Mr. Arrow. Otherwise, I would ask you to let me resign. I see, said the doctor. You wish us to keep this matter dark and to make a garrison of the stern part of the ship, manned with my friend's own people, and provided with all the arms and powder on board. In other words, you fear mutiny. Sir, said Captain Smollett, with no intention to make offense, I deny your right to put words into my mouth. No captain, sir, would be justified in going to sea at all if he had ground enough to say that. As for Mr. Arrow, I believe him thoroughly honest. Some of the men are the same. All may be for what I know. But I am responsible for the ship's safety and the life of every man, Jack, aboard of her. I see things going, as I think, not quite right, and I ask you to take certain precautions or let me resign my berth, and that's all. Captain Smollett, began the doctor with a smile, did you ever hear the fable of the mountain and the mouse? You'll excuse me, I dare say, but it reminds me of that fable. When you came in here, I'll stake my wig, you meant more than this. Doctor, said the captain, you are smart. When I came in here, I meant to get discharged. I had no thought that Mr. Trelawney would hear a word. No more I would, cried the squire. Had Livesey not been here, I should have seen you to the deuce. As it is, I have heard you. I will do as you desire, but I think the worse of you. That's as you please, sir, said the captain. You'll find I do my duty. And with that he took his leave. Trelawney, said the doctor, contrary to all my notions, I believed you have managed to get 2 honest men on board with you, that man and John Silver. Silver, if you like, cried the squire, but as for that intolerable humbug, I declare I think his conduct unmanly, unsailorly, and downright un-English. Well, say the doctor, we shall see. When we came on deck, the men had begun already to take the arms and powder, yo-hoing at their work, while the captain and Mr. Arrow stood superintending. The new arrangement was quite to my liking. The whole schooner had been overhauled. 6 berths had made astern out of what had been the after part of the main hold, and this set of cabins was only joined to the galley and the forecastle by a sparred passage on the port side. It had been originally meant that the captain, Mr. Arrow, Hunter, Joyce, and the doctor, and the squire were to occupy these 6 berths. Now Redruth and I were to get 2 of them. and Mr. Arrow and the captain were to sleep on deck in the companion, which had been enlarged on each side till you might almost have called it a roundhouse. Very low it was, of course, but there was room to swing 2 hammocks, and even the mate seemed pleased with the arrangement. Even he, perhaps, had been doubtful as the crew. But that is only a guess, for, as you shall hear, we had not long the benefit of his opinion. We were all hard at work, changing the powder and the berths, when the last man or two, and Long John Silver, along with them, came off in a shore boat. The cook came up the side like a monkey for cleverness, and as soon as he saw what he was doing, "So ho, mates," says he, "what's this? We're a-changing the powder, Jack?" answers one. "Why, by the powers," cried Long John, "if we do, we'll miss the morning tide." "My orders," said the captain shortly. "You may go below, my man. Hands will want supper." "Aye, aye, sir," answered the cook, and touching his forelock, he disappeared at once in the direction of his galley. "That's a good man, captain," said the doctor. "Very likely, sir," replied Captain Smollett. "Easy with the men, easy," he ran on, to fellows who were shifting the powder, and then suddenly, observing me examining the swivel we carried amidships, a long brass 9. "Here, you ship's boy, here," he cried out. "Out of that! Off with you to the cook and get some work." And then, as I was hurrying off, I heard him say, quite loudly to the doctor, "I'll have no favorites on my ship. I assure you I was quite of the squire's way of thinking and hated the captain deeply." And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 9. I hope you're enjoying this story. We're getting along very quickly, soon out to sea. Tomorrow night we will continue with chapter 9. This has been Indiana Holmes. Good night and love to you all.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.